Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with two athletes. The first is Cortez Kennedy, who died recently at the age of 48. He's one of the great Seattle Seahawks of all time. He's also one of the great defensive tackles in the history of the NFL. As a defensive tackle, he was bigger than fast men and faster than big men. He was the Defensive Player of the Year in 1992, and he was inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame in 2012. Problem with Cortez Kennedy is he played for some really bad teams in Seattle. The town loved him, but they were really bad in the 1990s. He was on the All-NFL team in the 1990s, and that's quite an accomplishment considering how bad the Seahawks were. But he was with some very good teams at the University of Miami in the late 80s, where he played for Jimmy Johnson, who said he was one of the best players he ever coached. And nobody knows football talent better than Jimmy Johnson. Here is NFL.com on Cortez Kennedy.
Defensive tackle Cortes Kennedy was one of the first 300-pound linemen who could sack the quarterback as relentlessly as he could stuff the run. Kennedy recorded 14 sacks in 1992 and was named the league's Defensive Player of the Year.
Just another day at work for Cortez Kennedy, but that's why this guy is so good, because he just disrupts things at the line of scrimmage.
Tez was a nimble big man who was selected to 8 Pro Bowls during his 11-year career with the Seahawks. Kennedy was more than just a heavyweight defender who could clog up the middle. He was an important player in NFL history because he helped expand the possibilities for how a big-body interior lineman could be utilized.
Cortez Kennedy is a load.
This load was light on his feet. Kennedy intercepted 3 passes during his career.
Down the middle of the field, the ball is batted and intercepted. Cortez Kennedy taking it the other way from the 40 to the 35. That's the way he's down the field, Tez.
Big Tubby. Right along. Woo!
Cortez Kennedy was powerful, durable, and surprisingly quick. Any history of the NFL would point to Kennedy as a game changer, who also changed the prototype of an NFL defensive tackle.
Well, we're going to move on to our next sports figure, Jim Bunning, who died recently at the age of 85. Jim Bunning was a 2-term senator from Kentucky, but that's not why we're doing him. Jim Bunning was also one of the greatest pitchers in Major League history. He broke in with the Detroit Tigers. I saw him pitch when I was a little kid with the Tigers. In a wonderful slider, he was a strikeout pitcher. He won over 100 games for the Tigers, including a no-hitter in 1958. Then he was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies, where he also won over 100 games, making him one of the only people who won 100 games in both leagues. And on June 21st, 1964, he pitched a perfect game on Father's Day. He had 7 children at the time, by the way. He was part of the great Phillies team in 1964 that collapsed in the last week of the season. One of the reasons was because manager Gene Mock tried to pitch him and Chris Short virtually every other day. But there's no taking away from Jim Bunning as a pitcher. When he retired, he was second all-time in strikeouts, only to Walter Johnson and a number of people have passed him since then. And he was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1996. Here's the Hall of Fame on Jim Bunning.
Pitching primarily with the Tigers and Phillies, Jim Bunning maintained dedication and consistency in posting 224 career wins. He was a menacing right-handed sidearmer who became the first pitcher to record 100 wins and 1,000 strikeouts in both the American and National Leagues. Bunning also pitched no-hitters in both circuits, including a perfect game at Shea Stadium on Father's Day in 1964. A dominant figure in the founding of the Players Union, he helped establish the Players' Pension Plan. Bunning was elected United States Senator from Kentucky in 1998 and a Baseball Hall of Famer in 1996.
Bunning's perfect game on Father's Day in 1964 is one of the greatest pitch games of all time. It was the first perfect game in the National League in almost 80 years. Koufax threw one the next year. And it was the first perfect game in the regular season in more than 40 years. Don Larson had thrown the only perfect game since the 1920s in the World Series. Here's the last out from Jim Bunning's perfect game on Father's Day in 1964 against the Mets.
Jim Bunning is 1 out from a perfect ball game. Coming on the bat for New York, and this crowd is right on the edge of their seats. If he gets Johnny Stevenson, you'll hear the roar go up. Looks in for his sign. 2 outs and nobody on. He's retired 26 in a row. Strike 1. Every pitch bringing a roar. the Shea Stadium crowd to a man there behind Jim Bunning. They're Mets fans, but they appreciate a great performance. One strike's the count. Strike two. You can never possibly come any closer and not get it. Jim Bunning is now one strike from a perfect ball game. How do you stay cool and how do you stay poised in a spot like this? The crowd is standing. To a man they're standing. Here's the pitch. Strike out. Perfect game. A perfect game for Jim Bunning. Here come his teammates. Oh, what a happy scene for the Phillies and Jim Bunning.
Well, later on, he fought with baseball management to improve the pension for players, and then he went on to become the conservative senator from Kentucky. But after you've thrown a perfect game in New York, you can pretty much handle all that other stuff. Well, we're going to move on now to Zbigniew Brzezinski, who died recently at the age of 89. He was a foreign policy advisor to Lyndon Johnson, but he gained his most renown as Jimmy Carter's national security advisor from 1977 to 1981. He's sometimes described as the Democratic counterpart to Henry Kissinger in terms of foreign policy. He was a sort of a contentious guy. I wasn't a big Zbigniew Brzezinski fan, but it's undeniable he had a big influence on American foreign policy in the last 25 years of the 20th century. Here's the Washington Post on Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski, the combative, visionary, foreign policy intellectual who helped bring Jimmy Carter to the White House in 1976 and then guided him through a series of international crises that contributed significantly to Carter's defeat at the polls, has died at the age of 89. The Polish-born strategist became a lightning rod for criticism over the roles he played in the Iranian hostage crisis, a broad but unrewarding diplomatic confrontation with the Soviet Union, and Carter's innovative but unevenly implemented human rights policy. Dr. Brzezinski's admirers focused on achievements that included the full normalization of U.S. relations with China, an expanded American role in the Middle East that produced an Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty and skillful involvement behind the scenes that kept Poland's 1980 solidarity revolt against communist rule alive and effective. The author of more than 30 crisply argued books, Dr. Brzezinski gradually moved away from the strident advocacy of military power and the need to show resolve that made his reputation as an anti-Soviet hawk during his tenure as Carter's national security advisor. Once a muscular advocate of U.S. escalation in Vietnam, he gradually came to put more emphasis on the need to be diplomatically and politically supportive of nationalist aspirations in developing countries. He strongly opposed the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The undeclared border war between Russia and Ukraine led him in 2014 to caution that the West should not bring Ukraine into a military alliance. That risked greater, more dangerous complications with Moscow, he argued. Dr. Brzezinski maintained that there was more continuity in his thinking than was apparent. I didn't have the time to correct distortions or misunderstandings of complex ideas, he said in a 2014 interview on his career. In any event, when I was in the White House, it helped me sell our positions to the real hawks in the administration. I took a lot of criticism that would otherwise have been focused on the president. Quick of wit and words and unwilling to back away from a fight of any dimension, Dr. Brzezinski was a captivating lecturer at Harvard and then at Columbia. As his powerfully written memoir, Power and Principle, made clear in 1983, he was driven by a lifelong determination to bend leaders and events to his fierce will. Well, we're going to move on to a little lighter subject now. Dina Merrill, who died recently at the age of 93. I love Dina Merrill. She was a great actress, but she never really got her due in movies. It's safe to say that Dina Merrill was, if not the richest woman ever in Hollywood, certainly right up there. She was the daughter of E.F. Hutton and Marjorie Merriweather Post of the Post fortune, and her first husband was an heir to the Colgate fortune. So she was never worried about where her next meal was coming from. She was beautiful, and against her parents' wishes, she went into acting, and she was a great actress, but she didn't really begin her movie career until her mid-30s because she stayed home with her children, and you can't begin your movie career when you're an actress in your mid-30s. So she had supporting roles opposite Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn in Desk Set, Cary Grant in Operation Petticoat, and Elizabeth Taylor in Butterfield 8, but she primarily went on to television. Now, in 1960, she was one of the hottest actresses in the country. She had her picture on Life magazine, and she was on What's My Line, coincidentally on the same episode as Arnold Palmer. The panel did not wear blindfolds to recognize Arnold Palmer because he wasn't that well known at the time, but they did wear blindfolds for her.
I haven't the vaguest idea. Are you Sandra Dee?
No, she sings. She's got records.
She don't.
No, that accent tied you all up in ribbons. Dena Merrill is here to meet you. Oxford, but you got Arlene fooled. You weren't even sure it was put on.
Perfect accident.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
really
great.
comes up an Italian lady visiting us, so I decided I'd be Italian tonight.
Mrs. Stanley Rumford, Junior, I might add. And the picture you were all searching for is Butterfield 8, or The Sundowners, or A Matter of Conviction. She's got 3 pictures coming.
What's Butterfield 8? That's John O'Hara.
Butterfield 8.
And that's the New York one.
That's what we were hoping you'd catch it there,
I must say that Miss Merrill has had more publicity than I think any actress in America in the course of the last year.
That's right.
Oh, very nice of you to say so.
Well, you to say that.
And thank you for being our guest.
Well,
Delightful
thank
to
you.
have you in Westmoreland. Nice to see you again.
As I said, she went to television. She did a great episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents with Peter Fall, pre-Columbo, and she divorced the Colgate heir and married Cliff Robertson, whose podcast we've done, and they were all over TV together. My favorite of their roles together was they were villains on Batman. He was Cowboy Shane, and she was Calamity Jan.
We got 325 wild horses up this here hood.
Yeah, I gotta hand it to you, Calamity. You're a woman and a half. If you can just get rid of the other half.
Oh, shame, honey. Can't you just picture how happy we're going to be?
Yeah.
You and Ma and me living on our own spread west of Laramie, where the air is clear and smog-free and the corn is as high as Chief Standing Pat's eye. Can't you just picture it? Shame, honey, you seen my Ma.
Yeah, I've seen too much of her lately.
I think we must have left her at the stable with the horses.
Well, don't worry, nobody will notice.
Well, we gotta go back and get her.
No can do, lover. By now, she's probably a prisoner of the police. Might as well give her up for gone.
Honey, she's my mother, the only one I got.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, don't be like that. I know she's a battle axe and an old owl, but she is my flesh and blood.
Yeah, I was wondering about that heredity. What'd your father look like?
Oh, he was prettier than my ma.
Nobody could be uglier.
Well, can't we try and rescue her?
What do you want me to do, bust into police headquarters? That's like putting my own head in my own noose.
Well, we could trade her for Batgirl, like a prisoner swap.
No, that ain't no swap. If I swap like that, I wouldn't have a pot to put my head in for a haircut.
Well, can't we try, honey? Please? Please?
Oh, you know I can't stand to see a woman cry. All right.
About 10 years later, Cliff Robertson tried to expose the embezzlement scandal of producer David Begelman, and all of Hollywood tried to scare him off. They closed ranks and threatened his career, but when you're married to Dina Merrill, her money and her connections, you're not that easily intimidated, and eventually he broke the scandal. And more than a little of it had to do with Dina Merrill calling her friend Katharine Graham, who happened to be the publisher of the Washington Post. Ultimately, she and Cliff Robertson got divorced. She married an investment banker, and her last really good role was in the movie The Player, directed by Robert Altman, where she had a good supporting role opposite Tim Robbins and Cynthia Stevenson as a no-nonsense but sympathetic executive secretary.
Really, it's very important. I need to talk to him right now.
No, Bonnie, he's very busy.
Sylvia, please.
No, you please.
Bonnie, we're
Bonnie, you don't understand. I am not just me, I'm also the job.
Please.
Contract. Oh, Walter, stop that nonsense. Griffin, it's Bonnie. She's here.
Did he fire her?
Yes, sir, I guess he did.
Well, I can't see her now. I promise I'd be home early.
Tell him so.
Yes. Okay, could you hold, please? Griffin, it's not the ladies. Griffin, please. Very important. Griffin, please. Can we talk about it?
Bonnie, you'll land on your feet. I know it.
Griffin,
You're a
it's not
survivor.
Amy's office. He says it's very important.
It's a good movie. You should check it out. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. We're going to close tonight with Gregg Allman, who died recently at the age of 69. Gregg had an up-and-down career with the Allman Brothers, one of the great gospel, R&B, country rock groups, especially in the 1970s. His better-known and more talented brother, Dwayne, died in a motorcycle crash just as the group hit it big. For 40 years, Gregg was married to Cher. That must have been something. And a little later in his career, he turned in his manager on a narcotics charge that earned him the enmity of his bandmates. But in all those years, he made a lot of good music with the various iterations of the Allman Brothers. So we'll close with his signature song from Wild South in 1970, Midnight Rider. It grew out of a rough late-night demo recorded after an inspired Gregg broke into Capricorn Sound Studios, and his brother Dwayne completed things by adding his own asides later.
So I'm not gonna